As a photographer, we live in really exciting times. Many people the world over now have almost instant access to cameras to capture the world they inhabit. With the growth of the internet, there's the capability to then distribute and share those images on a global basis. There's no two ways about it. We live in an increasingly visual world. As a photographer who's traditionally captured still images, but increasingly who captures video images, like many of you, I've been watching the debate that's been going on about the rise of mirrorless and the demise of DSLRs with real interest. I'm sure you'll agree 2018 was a really interesting year from a mirrorless perspective. You had Nikon launching their Z series, you had Canon launching their EOS R, you had Fuji and Panasonic raising the game around their existing cameras. All of them really chasing Sony, who've been so innovative in the mirrorless space. Over the years, I've dabbled with mirrorless cameras. I've got a Fuji X-T10, I've got a Sony RX100 Mark V, which I use for video. However, probably my investment in the past in the Nikon ecosystem has meant that I've traditionally stuck with DSLRs. I've remained a user of Nikon cameras and lenses over the years. However, I accept that no camera is ever really going to be the perfect camera. The way technology is, the way innovation is that if it's working well, there will always be trade-offs. At times, one camera system has the edge over another, and we have to accept that. Yet, like many of you, I'm sure, I aspire for that perfect camera. Like many of you, 2018 has had me scratching my head. As a Nikon user, I've been using a Nikon D850 for the last couple of years. I was lucky enough to get one of the first batch that came into the UK when they were launched, and it's been a great camera. However, there are, as I said, some trade-offs. The D850 is an absolutely superb pro camera. It's got superb image quality, both in terms of low light capabilities and dynamic range. It's got great autofocus. I've used it for capturing dancers where the autofocus combined with the continuous shooting modes have got some great images. When it comes to battery life, the battery lasts all day. It can last up to 2,000 shots. Its 45.7 megapixel sensor, some would say, is just too big. However, for me, it's allowed me to accept and challenge the way I work, in that I now know I can crop in on images yet still be able to print them at great resolution at A2 size. It's got dual card slots, whether you use those for instant backups or you use them to capture different formats. It's got the XQD, which is a really robust card system, yet it's got a fast SD card system as well, which works great with my workflow. Above all, the D850 is a really robust camera. It served me great. I was in Iceland. It was 85-mile-an-hour Atlantic winds, ice, sleet, snow. Didn't miss a shot. Those of you who've got a D850 will know that whilst it's a superb camera, it does have some trade-offs. That 45.7 megapixel sensor is a bit of a double-edged sword. It can produce some superb images. However, it is very susceptible to any kind of movement while the shutter is open, and therefore vibration reduction is really quite beneficial. Equally, it's quite picky that when it comes to getting really crisp, sharp images, it likes the best glass. It likes the f2.8 lenses such as the 2470, the 7200, from Nikon. And therefore that then means that when you marry those up with the D850 body, you end up with quite a heavy set of kit to be moving around. Due to their very nature, DSLRs, due to the laws of physics, are going to be bigger than mirrorless cameras, and therefore if size is important to you, the D850, especially when married up with those f2.8 lenses, does come in as quite a big set of kit. If video is important to you, then the D850 sensor can capture some great 4K footage, but as a camera it really wasn't designed with video in mind, and therefore the autofocus does tend to let it down a little because it does tend to hunt quite a lot. Equally, the lenses are quite noisy, and therefore this makes the in-camera microphones less than usable in a lot of situations. So with the Z series launch, like many of you, it got me scratching my head. Would this give me an opportunity to remain in the Nikon ecosystem with the gear that I'd invested in to date? Would it allow me to take advantage of a smaller camera body and all of the benefits that come with that, to access some of the more innovative kit that's been developed around the Sony ecosystem? Would it allow me to benefit from a lighter body and perhaps when used with native Z series lenses, a lighter set of gear overall? Equally, with the rise in needs that my clients have around video, had Nikon designed the Z series around both stills and also video? So would it overcome that hunting autofocus, noisy lenses, to give one set of gear that really, like the Sony mirrorless series of cameras, access to both stills and video capabilities? When the D850 was released, it was obvious to me that it was a major step up from my D800, and therefore I committed to a D850 in that first batch that arrived. With the Z series, for me it wasn't such an obvious decision. I guess it's a compliment to my D850 that I didn't jump immediately. It's a great camera, and the compelling case for jumping to a Z series early on in its life wasn't there for me. That was borne out by some of the reviews, some of the comments that were made online. There were some concerns around the limited range of lenses that were released on launch. There were some concerns around perhaps the battery life. There were also some concerns around banding. There were concerns around the autofocus capabilities, and also perhaps the buffer size. But probably most noise, as you'll remember, was reserved for that single card slot debate. The loss of the SD card and the focusing in on a single XQD card. Like many of you, I'm sure I watched with interest the debate raging, because for me, it's not about the person reviewing the camera necessarily. It's about the trade-offs that I as a photographer will have to make when using any particular gear for the type of photography that I do. And to be honest, the first time I got my hands on what I think it was a Z6, I wasn't as impressed as I thought I was going to be. It wasn't as light as I thought it was going to be. There was, however, that Nikon ergonomics. It felt like a Nikon. It felt like my D850. The buttons were in the same place. And for me, that was really important. One of the reasons I've remained a Nikon user over the years is that when you're out in the field, that ability to move from one mode to another without thinking about it is so valuable. That man-machine interface that you become so used to is what allows you to quickly get the images you get. So I was lucky. I got to try a whole range of the different lenses with the different bodies, and what I realized was actually the Nikon lenses, while some people call the 2470 a kit lens, its quality is so much above what we've perhaps expected from a kit lens in the past, both in terms of sharpness, in terms of noise from a video perspective. Its size, its weight and its capability are really designed around not only a 45.7 megapixel camera, but probably a camera with much higher resolution requirements. And that could be an indication of where Nikon will go with the Z range perhaps. I think that because Nikon released the FTZ adapter, and that I could keep my 24-7 f2.8, my 7200 f2.8 lenses, gave me some reassurance as well, and they work really well with that adapter and the Z7 and the Z6 bodies. When it comes to battery performance, what I've realized is the CEPA measurements are really a baseline. In my day-to-day usage, I get much better performance from the batteries than the CEPA measurements would indicate, and that's great because it's the same batteries as my D850, so I've got enough batteries that I can cope with a performance that's below the D850 but above the CEPA measurements. When it comes to that divisive memory card issue of a single memory card versus dual memory cards. Yes, my D850 gives me the capability to have a fast SD card, which is great for my mobile workflow because a lot of the workflow I use is better with SD cards. The XQD card is undoubtedly a robust card, and for me, most of what I shoot doesn't require me to have real-time backups. I can adjust my workflow to cope with the single card slot. When it comes to the banding issue, I've been able to recreate banding. However, because it's repeatable and you can create it, for me that makes it less of an issue. It actually shows me where the edge of the performance envelope is, and therefore I can make sure that when I'm shooting I can keep back and away from that performance edge, and therefore banding for me won't be an issue. From talking to some of the Nikon experts and people who've already got the Z series cameras, it was obvious to me that there are some nuances, some subtle differences between the autofocus system in the Z series and the D850, and therefore for me that's an area I'm going to have to really get to grips with and really understand where are those differences, how does it work, and what are the situations and which are the modes you use in different situations to get the best images from the camera. When I looked at all the trade-offs between the D850, its pros and cons, the Z series and their pros and cons, I felt it was time for me to add a Z series camera to my kit bag. And therefore I've added a Z7 to my kit bag, and it's this journey from DSLR to mirrorless that we're going to be going on with you in this channel. It's going to be a mixture of looking at how I get on with the Z7, how I set it up, some of the advantages that mirrorless brings, but also paralleled with some small kit reviews, gear reviews around the Z series cameras. We'll also be looking at how I use it and how I then take the images through my workflow, so focusing on my use of Lightroom, Photoshop. It's a journey I'm really excited about. I love getting new kit, new things to actually get to grips with, and my move from DSLR to mirrorless and my increasing move across into doing more video is going to give us some great examples to learn together through this channel about what works, what doesn't work. So if you're thinking of going on a journey, whether it be increasing your video content, whether it's moving from DSLR to mirrorless, leave a comment below. Let's have a look at how we can learn together through this channel. It's an exciting time. I think we're really at a tipping point in the balance between DSLRs and mirrorless. So let's use this channel to really learn together and go on that journey together.